Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I am your co-host, Joe the College Pro, alongside my partner, Dave Kozak. Dave, the CEO. Dave, how's life, sir?
You know, it seems like every week we talk about this. It is the season. It's college decision season. So we're running it at full tilt right now. Seeing some crazy stuff. I got stories to talk about. I've got new clients that I've got just came in, and outstanding student, 1560, above board on everything, getting waitlisted and deferred at all kinds of places. And I think it has to do with bad advice he was given in the admissions process. But we'll talk about that as we get into the show here.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a great conversation today because we have a special guest host, Peter Cappelli. He's of the Wharton School. I have your credentials that went away on my paper here. Dave, why don't you got them in front of you? Sorry, it just went away.
Sure. So Peter is the George W. Taylor Professor of Management at the Wharton School and Director of the Wharton Center for Human Resources. He's also a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, senior advisor to the Kingdom of Bahrain and employment policy from '03 to '05. Since 2007, distinguished scholar in the Ministry of Manpower for Singapore, and the list continues to go. So I think without further ado.
Yeah. Books, articles. Peter, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we are college planners. That's what we do. We plan financially, academically. We help people target schools. We help them not overpay for schools. Our whole career is based around where I think you can bring some real special insight to our listening audience. And more than ever in my career, I'm getting the question, is it worth it? Like, should we go? Does the name brand, does the fame, the fit, like, what are the most important things? So I guess I'll pitch off a first one for you is, obviously you're going to have far deeper research on it, but is it worth it? And what's the general sort of when it's worth it and when it's not?
Yeah, so just tell you how I got interested in this. I spent a long time thinking about education and the workforce. And with a colleague, I ran a research center for the Department of Education on this topic for a long time. And I got irritated by my colleagues in the economic profession a while ago who were arguing that everybody should go to college, that it was such an obvious payoff. And so because of that, I started to dive in and take a look at exactly this question. I wrote a book called Will College Pay Off? Exactly about this question. And here's the important thing to remember. It is true on average that in the past, having a college degree really paid off, right? However, having a college degree and going to college are not the same thing. Right? So we know, for example, that for full-time students, that is going to school, full-time, only 40% of them graduate in 4 years. Only 60% graduate in 6 years, that is going to school full-time. And then a big chunk never graduate. Now, the term never is tricky in the US because you can always go back and eventually finish a degree even after you retire. So we don't know for sure, but a non-trivial guess is about 30% of people who start college are never going to graduate. If you go to college and you don't graduate, it's not worth going, especially if you're taking out student loans, which are really onerous, right? So
Mm-hmm.
parents need to understand this. The student loans are not cheap. You can get a car loan much, much cheaper than a half the price of a college
Hmm.
loan. That market's kind of rigged. You can't get out from under college loans unless a particular president wants to let you off of the federal loans. But
Mm-hmm.
the number of federal loans, which are cheaper you can get, is nowhere near going to cover the cost of college. So most students end up taking private loans, right?
Yep.
Bankruptcy will not get you out from under them. So it's a non-trivial question about whether you should send your kid to college, especially if it means, as the parents, you're going to delay retirement or you've got to take loans out against your house and all that sort of stuff. So what's it going to
Mm-hmm.
cost you, right? For most of us who have more money, middle class and above, we're doing it not because it's going to guarantee a great job for our kids, but because we think it is part of the life experience that prepares them as a human being. And
Yeah.
I say this as a parent who has at least one kid with a graduate degree in art, and he went back to become a welder, right?
Mm.
So I imagine if I asked him today, would you rather have had that money for the MFA and the college degree parked in a Vanguard 500 mutual fund for the last 30 years or 20 years or so, which would have doubled every 7 years, and you'd be sitting on $500,000. He might say, I'd rather have had the money. So
Yeah.
it's not a completely obvious question. And I think the
Hmm.
big answer for parents, the big thing you can think about is, do I think my kid is really ready to go to college and make it? Or is it that I just can't think of anything else to do with them at this
Mm.
point and everybody else is going to college, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Send your kid to college and they're not going to make it. It's going to be a hard financial burden on you. And it doesn't mean you don't love your kids if you think, look, my kid, I want him to go to college, but I don't think she's quite ready now. So let's just put this off and figure it out later.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's some research that shows sometimes that put it off and that earn money becomes you get a taste of earnings and then you don't rebound to it. And not to say that that's not right or wrong, just that
Mm.
it
Yeah.
I think for parents the fear is if you do that gap year or you take that job, then are they ever going to come back? And I think historically, the hope of the parent was you saw what it was like to have a labor job or to not have a high paying job. And that was the incentive to go back to school. I
Yeah.
think sometimes it can boomerang the other way, which is like, I'm earning money. And, mom and dad, I'm still living at their house. I don't have a true
Hmm.
understanding of expenses of life. I'm not there
Yeah.
yet economically.
Yeah.
And so you get this false sense of security.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And parents who are looking back on it, like me, sometimes wonder whether we have enabled our kids to stretch this launching out longer than we
Hmm.
weren't doing them any
Yeah.
favors,
Yeah.
by doing that. But that's, it's a broader question. I think that just one other
Hmm.
thing about the research on this, which you'd think we have nailed down, but we absolutely don't. There are three explanations as to why people who go to college and graduate, that's the key thing, do better by a lot than those who don't, right? One explanation is people who go to college are more capable than people who don't on average, right? They have more cognitive ability, they've got maybe executive skills that allow them to do it, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And the second part of that is that they may have more social support. And that means
Hmm.
families with money and connections that could get them the kind of resume that allows you to get into a better college, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and that's really what you're measuring. Now, neither of those things have a role for what college actually does to you. That's really kind of screening stuff, right? Part of that too might
Yeah.
be that you get a bang simply from finishing college because you've demonstrated to an employer that you can see things through and actually graduate as opposed to
Yeah.
not finishing college. And the last one, which is the one that particularly in economics, we paid the most attention to, is you're actually learning stuff that is useful in
Mm,
work afterwards. And it's not just that you're 4 years older and slightly more mature, right? Now, you would think we would
Mm-hmm.
know which of those is most important, but the reality is we don't, right? And it
mm,
is important to keep that in mind that we really don't know how much of this benefit comes from the idea that college is pouring your head full of important and useful stuff. And if it is, one of the things we hear about why is it that online degrees don't seem to matter very much for people's jobs afterwards, employers don't like them very much,
Mm-hmm.
don't give a premium for them, is because a lot of what you learn in US residential colleges is not so much the academic material. It's the ability to get along with other people. You're
Mm.
growing up a little bit more. You're learning things from them that kind of matter. You're
mm.
developing expectations, which are different. All that stuff is important, but you're probably not going to get it if you live at home and go to college or you are taking an online degree program. That is why US college is so much more expensive than in the rest of the world. It's really a different experience here when you're in residence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So a question I'm intrigued by or a comment when I've talked there's a large Indian population in our area, and there are a lot of transplants from because my understanding in having conversations with them was like, well, in their school system, right, you show an aptitude and they put you on a track and they send you there. Now, I can't I've never studied it. I don't know anything about it, but there's this idea that those that have that aptitude and capability are pushed in a different direction than those that might not, and they're pushed in a different direction and they sort of track people out.
Yeah.
I think that's counterintuitive to the US sort of culture of like, hey, anybody can be successful if you work hard and put your mind to it. Um, and, but there's a lot of success in that type of model, which I think when you talk about how do we correlate that and how do we actually use that in the US on the individual basis, I think it's more about being honest and taking a good look at your student, their pursuits, their interests, the things, and planning just a little bit more. I don't know if it's just honesty, but it's taking a hard look at your student and saying, if we push you to this, I mean, you've already said that if you go and don't graduate, it is not worth it at
Mm-hmm.
all. And so if we know that 30% of the people will never graduate, or that's not a steadfast number, but it's a good academic assumption, we know that 30% of the people that enter the system are never going to get out of that system, and it's going to be not worth it. So we're not sorting well enough at entry point, right? I mean, I look at my business, my objective is to find the people that want to do business with me. I don't want to spend all of my time courting people that have no interest in what we do for a living, right? So
Yeah.
we try
Yeah.
and sift and sort those people.
Yeah.
Is that how does a parent or how does a family sort of
Yeah.
approach that honest conversation?
Right. Well, I think for middle class and above families, I don't think they are thinking about college education just as a way to get a job for their kids. This is partly
Hmm.
consumption, this is partly development for them. And those are perfectly good reasons for sending your kid to a college. It becomes more complicated if you really can't afford it, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
family's going to give up other things in order to get their kid to college. It is also frustrating for the kids if they get through college and discover that there's no job for them. Partly depends on what their career track was in college, which is something I imagine we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Hmm.
But it's not always just an unbridled good thing, the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
experience for kids. Not everybody has a great time in college, especially if they weren't ready to go to college. Financially, one of the quirkier things is a huge proportion of college students now are taking remedial courses in their first year. That is, they're repeating the high school experience. Now, as
Mm-hmm.
you say, the great thing about the US system is that you're never out, right? You can always find some way to go back into college. One of my kids did exactly that and went back to community college, and he's a doctor now. And remarkable achievement. You're never out. And
Mm-hmm.
European schools, particularly in India, where they have access to education, higher education was really, really narrow. If you got to that higher level of education, your path was set. The way it used to be in the US a generation or two ago, that you just graduated from college, there was
Hmm.
somebody willing to hire you. What's changed in the US is first, employers are not interested in hiring people and developing them anymore, which
Mm,
is how I got interested in this topic. And the second is we really have expanded the number of people who can go to college. Now, you
Hmm.
might think that's a good thing in terms of equity, right? It's much easier. State university systems expanded incredibly. We're still, giving people loans and things to make it easier for more people to go.
mhm.
But, the advantage of having a college degree diminishes when almost everybody seems to have one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that we are unfortunately dealing with. And if you're a parent, and everybody has got a college degree and your kid doesn't, you look like you're depriving them, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. There was Joe, you did a show solo a few weeks back
Hmm.
where you were talking to her last name was Rob.
Yeah.
And she she was talking about a concept that I've thought about, but I haven't really delved into and explored much. But is this idea that today's education requires a child to go from don't know how to speak and write to I know how to speak and write. I know how to use AI. I know how to use computers. I know how to use all these things that 30, 40 years ago you didn't have to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And so her argument was her big push is to make like the 2 year associates community college environment like 13th and 14th grade to expand the time they get to learn some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not pro or against. My question to you, Peter, is are we having to jam so much in the same period of time that we have forever, expansive education and technology simultaneously, and that sort of continuum that exists? Are kids not quite as ready as they used to be, which has driven that graduation rate down?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think actually there's any truth to that. I think college standards on the academic side have fallen, workloads have fallen, things have gotten
Mm.
a lot easier, frankly, for students. Some of that is because, if you went back 100 years ago when my father was in college was really pretty hard.
Yeah.
I remember looking at what my father did at liberal arts college, and they were doing the same thing I was doing at Cornell as an undergraduate, trying to understand how radios work and all the systems in their physics classes and stuff. It was really pretty hard stuff. Hours of work that they're spending outside of class is way down compared to what
Mm.
those folks did. Now, it was very few people going to college in those days. So,
Yeah.
obviously the better kids were, on average, their capabilities were probably better. I think on the technology side, there's a confusion. So I'm sort of deep into thinking about the implications of AI for work now. But there's a confusion always between the complexity of the technology and the complexity of using it, right? So
Hmm.
large language models are really, really complicated to build. We don't actually understand always how they produce the answers they do. But using it is a piece of cake, right?
Mm,
That's why it's so ubiquitous, because anybody can use it. In fact, we're
Yeah.
mostly using it. We don't even know when we are, right? Because every time you do a search engine now, the AI behind the search engines is giving you an answer. I
Yeah.
do think, though, the part that is right about that is that employers are incredibly short-sighted now, that they are hiring people for not for skills per se, even though they say they are, the things that they
Hmm.
say they want are exactly the same as the thing educators say that we should be doing, teaching you critical thinking skills, the ability to communicate. It used to be ability to write, although I think that's stopping now because AI is writing most college papers for them.
mm,
But if you look at what they actually want when they go recruiting, they're looking to see whether you can do the job they need to have done now.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
the only way you demonstrate that, the only thing they really care about is work experience. And that is the idea of internships. Uh,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's clubs and student work that they've had. Otherwise, it might look like what you want them to do. There are a few places where they still are kind of hiring to train people. It's mainly consulting firms, accounting firms, that sort of stuff. And they go to the more competitive elite schools to suck those folks up. But otherwise, they want to know, have you done this job before? And that is the bad thing about higher education, I think, right now, is that we have turned it into a much more vocational experience.
Mm.
So, there are college majors. In my book, I dragged up some of them. Turf management, which a lot of
Hmm.
universities have. You're learning about how to manage a golf course, the course itself. Casino construction management, we have that program here in Philadelphia. Drug marketing, pharmaceutical marketing, and they don't mean selling drugs on the street corner. That probably profitable, but being a pharma company and I mean, they're incredibly vocational. They got
Hmm.
majors that look like job titles.
Yeah.
It,
And just to finish the thought there for just a second, why is that such a bad thing if you're a parent? Because you're paying college tuition for your kids to get work experience.
yeah.
And it seems really bizarre. Now, just so you know why that happens, because uh, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you can't volunteer to work for a for-profit organization. They have to pay you, right?
Mm.
So the only exception to that is if your experience is just about learning. And if you do it through a college and the college is a, internship program, it seems to pass that test.
Got it.
So your kid's working for free, you're paying tuition for your kid to go work for this company to get experience, so somebody else will believe that they can do it, and that's how they get a job.
Hmm.
It's definitely something that I have watched happen from a standpoint of I think the biggest gripe I had coming out of college, and I got a great education. I went to Franklin Marshall. I loved every bit of it. I got a well-rounded liberal arts education. I've got no complaints about that. But every time I applied for a job in 2005, it was, what's your work experience? What have you done? What have you done? Well, I've got this great degree that I paid a lot of money for, double major in business and economics, like from a
Right.
good school. Well, but you haven't done it. And I want to even make it more impactful because we're in the financial services industry as part of the sector that we play in. And through the 80s and 90s, if you go to any successful financial advisor that's in their late 50s, early 60s, they came through these amazing training programs at Prudential, at you name the financial institution.
Hmm.
They would bring in a crew of 100 people, they would train them, and they would ship them out on the street.
Mhm.
And there is none of it. Northwestern Mutual is probably the only company that still has that, but it's not training like it was. It's
Yeah,
basically it's like instant fire training and then go out and press the flesh.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What we've had to do and what's been very interesting, I've been recruiting younger people into a training environment and we've had great success at it because what they want is the opportunity to prove that they can do it. But nobody will take the time to show them how to be successful. And that is what training is. It's
Yeah.
like showing people
Right.
how to do that. And so the financial services industry is one that is, I mean, it's like every mentor I had goes back to Prudential, basically. They
Hmm.
Mhm.
all were some level of Prudential's
Mhm.
world, and none of them do it anymore. So, but isn't that also a sort of a supply and demand? Like the institutions getting the way that internships and co-ops and all of that are happening now are sort of the school has to have a ratio of people that get hired. Like that's the only job that a school really is judged on is like how many of your kids graduate and get a job. And so the
Mhm.
school then has to sort of pivot what it really wants to do and then make programs to give what corporate America wants to see. And so
Yeah.
it's this constant struggle.
Hmm.
No, you're exactly right. And that is the big problem. And it is a national policy problem that we have stopped training. Right. So if you look in the US now, the best data that I've seen recently, the average employee gets about 1 day of training a year, and that counts everything, including fire drills, how to get out of the
Yeah.
building and how to use the new the new copier and all that stuff, right? So they stopped training, and particularly for new hires, they have decided they're just not going to do that. So, you know, and it's terrible because, to try to teach somebody to be a plumber in a classroom,
Yeah.
is really hard, right?
Yeah.
But yet that's kind of where we have ended up. So higher education is not well suited to do this. Employers are, but we've
Yeah.
turned to higher education because there's nowhere else. And, higher education is struggling to figure out how to do this. And we end up,
Hmm.
with a lot of programs in college, not the better programs, but, the ones that um, maybe are not as selective, where we're basically trying to give people work experience
Hmm.
in a context where we're not good at it. So my son, who is a welder, after 2 degrees in college, it's super hard to get those skills.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's become a welder. Well, it turns out there are apprenticeship programs. They're really, really tiny in the US.
Hmm.
We have the weakest, smallest apprenticeship programs in the developed world. There's all kinds of reasons for that. One of them is education and training is not a federal responsibility, it's state and local. And
Hmm.
the problem with local is in Philadelphia, let's say, where I'm sitting, you train people, they go to work in New Jersey, they just cross the river, they go south, they're in Delaware, they move, you've lost the investment in them. So what was the point there? And employers don't want to do it. So
Yeah.
we've got right next to me here, Drexel is famous, Drexel University, for its co-op program, right?
Yep.
And as I understand it from people who work there, employers love it, but the program, they'll say, I want to get in your program. I want to hire some of your co-op students. I say, great. They'll finish. Let's set you up with some. They'll finish in 5 years and they'll be ready. No, no, I want to hire them now. Well, the co-op program is this long back and
Yeah.
forth
Hmm.
experience. I don't want to do that. I just want to hire them now, right? So
Hmm.
we end up with a higher ed system which is just not well suited to it. Apprenticeships are perfect. We don't have very many of them because employers don't want to engage in them. And,
Hmm.
so just tell a story about my son. Where would you get this experience? Well, you go to community colleges. They're way underfunded and they've got a dual mission. Half the students in community colleges are in liberal arts. Why is that? Because they're there, as you were saying earlier, they're there because they want to transfer into a 4-year college and their grades weren't good enough or they weren't ready, etc. Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
But then we also want them to do this incredibly practical education there, and they're not well suited for it.
Hmm.
So my son discovered he went to community college and got, welding skills. Welding is beautiful because it's very clear whether you can do it or not.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
you have these certifications for every type of welding. Can you do it or not? That's it. But
Yep.
he discovered that even out of these programs, the employers want people who have finished the 2-year degree program in
Hmm.
Yep.
welding. Why do you need 2 years in college to be a welder? Well, they stretch it out. So
Yep.
Yeah.
we got a really imperfect fit. We've
Mm.
turned to higher education to do this. It's not well suited, but we're stuck with it, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too because I have felt the burn of investing an incredible amount of time, effort, and energy as a business owner into training someone
Yep.
and having them use me as their experience leverage to go elsewhere. And it
Yep.
hurts. And I will never go away from it because I think it's the most important thing that you can do. But at the same time, like when corporate America got into the real boom of profits are everything and driving stock investment and IPOs and the amount of, probably around 2000 when it transferred the dot-com era boom, when all that started happening, when they're looking to cut expenses, what's the one they cut, right? But they don't seem to understand
Yeah.
that the 10-year horizon or the 20-year horizon of cutting something like that. You've no
Yeah.
backfill. And that's what
No,
happened in the
that's right.
financial services industry.
Yeah.
When I came into it, I was 30 years old. Everybody that was successful was 50. There was a 20-year time gap where
Yeah.
training didn't exist, where people didn't
Yeah.
happen. And so it's a big issue.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's one more issue on that that is worth pointing out, and something that I guess I figured out. The financial accounting system is rigged against human capital. And you probably all know this, but human capital can't be an asset under GAAP rules. So you could have employees under contract to you. It doesn't count because you can only be an asset if it's something that's owned. As long as we don't own you, can't be an asset. You can't invest in something that's not an asset. So training, even though we think of it and talk about it as an investment, it's not an investment. It counts as operating and administrative expenses, which is also where your expending on coffee goes, right? So
Yeah.
it looks like if you're spending money on training, it just looks to investors like you're blowing it, right, on
Hmm.
office stuff. And that creates this bias. If you want to make your company look good, it's not just that you're cutting expenses, you're cutting the ones that are that don't help you in terms of the way you appeal to financial
Mhm.
institutions, and that's training first. There is a proposal before the SEC. I imagine it's going nowhere in this current administration, but it's pushed by investors to require companies to report their training expenditures.
Mm.
That would matter a lot. To also report their total employment, I mean, total workforce, because
Yeah.
you probably also know performance is measured on a per employee basis, not a per worker basis. So if I dump my current employees and I replace them with contractors, the
Hmm.
denominator falls, I suddenly look wildly more valuable, right, per employee
Hmm.
basis. So the proposal is we should require these things so investors could tell what's going on. Employers don't want it. They don't want any new requirements. They just hate to report stuff. So I don't know whether it's going to get anywhere, but that's also why we're stuck in this problem.
I wanted to circle back about from a major perspective. Your son, 2 degrees, becomes a welder. I know that, numbers are crazy how many people pick a major and actually don't go into that as their career. They look
Yeah.
back and
Yeah.
said, "Oh, I studied this, and what do you do now? Something completely
Yeah.
different." But how important is it, and what should parents and students know when they're getting ready for college about picking a major? What are some things that are always overlooked, whether it's yeah, you pick this
Yeah.
major, it's popular now because job numbers are big, but 4 years from now, maybe not.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things, a very simple thing about picking colleges with respect to majors is that you want to go to a place that's big enough that your kid can change majors without having to change schools, right? And this is the problem
Okay.
of, very vocationally oriented schools. You get there and then it turns out you hate engineering, you really are interested in communication, you discover that, but you can't major in it because the school doesn't have it. The other thing when you're looking at colleges, if you're looking at majors, you want to see how difficult is it to complete the major. And this is something you can tell kind of easily. You can see how many prerequisites they are and also in what order they have to be taken. So,
Hmm.
you can say to yourself, my kid will graduate on time, darn it. And I can tell you that sometimes they don't, and it's not their fault. One of my
Yeah.
kids switched majors in college, and it turned out they had these prerequisites, and that course was not offered the semester that he could take it. Therefore, he couldn't finish the major, and he had to hang around to get
Oh,
that,
wow.
right? So what you're looking, it happens a lot, actually. You can look and see, I want to go into this major. What are the prerequisites for it look like? How often are they offered? And do they have to be in a particular sequence? The more the sequence
Hmm.
is, the harder it's going to be to finish that major. So you can figure that stuff out, right? But back to the question of how practical should the major be? Yeah, the data, I've forgotten the percentage, something I used to know on top of my head. The percentage of STEM graduates who get jobs in STEM fields, and as I recall, it's less than half, you know. So that's a kind of myth, that all STEM is where you should go. That's where the jobs are. The jobs are in a couple of narrow areas in STEM, and that is engineering and healthcare mainly right now. if you get a job in biology, you're not going to make any more money than a sociology graduate, So it's not STEM per se, right? It is a couple of areas where the jobs are hot, but even there, it changes so frequently. I want to just make sure you guys are frozen, that we're still connected.
The
Oh,
entire
okay. Ooh.
building's internet just
Ah,
went down.
okay. Well, you want to
So
finish this some other time, or what works for you?
Let's see if we can get them back on and finish the
Yeah.
episode, because it's a really
Okay.
good show for our family.
Okay.
thank you so much.
Okay.
Apologies
Yep.
for the technical issues, but
Yeah. No, I
definitely
understand. It
looking
happens.
forward to talking with you again.
All right. All right. We'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.